We both have had the honour recently of interviewing Richard Dawkins.
Yes.
And then the sort of scary honour of messaging one another, like, what are we going to do? This is scary. But it was great for both of us, I think. But when I was there, a woman and her husband left. Did I tell you this?
You mentioned it to me in an email, but you didn't say what they had said. What was it about?
So this is how cultish I think people are now. So I asked Richard about it. I was like, I had to do all the boring genome stuff first.
I love that stuff.
I'm joking as well. That was interesting. It was good, but get that out of the way. Lots of palimpsest. Lots of palimpsest talk, DNA, genomes, and all that. And then I was like, what do you think about trans? So got him to talk about that. And then he was like, he told this beautiful story about an explorer who, I don't know who it was though, but someone in the snow, some snow explorer who thought they were a woman and blah, blah, blah. And he was so sympathetic.
It's not Jan Morris, is it?
Or maybe.
Jan Morris was the journalist who accompanied the people who, the expedition that conquered Everest.
Oh, okay. I think I'm 70% it was.
Yeah, it will have been.
Okay, so he said he described it beautifully and in a really kind way to that side. I think that's his version of be kind.
Yes.
And even used she, her pronouns, which I don't think you or I do, but I understand why he did that. And I thought it was really nice. And he said at the end, of course, it doesn't really mean that he was a woman. Of course not. And it got an applause. And then as the applause subsided, you started hearing these goat noises, which I didn't know what they were at first. It was like, no. Yeah, and it was quite a few people. And then, as far as I know, two, and it was a couple, like walked out saying, I'm not having this. I don't know. I couldn't. It was all blinded by the lights kind of thing. I was told afterwards that they ran out saying, I can't handle this. This is bullshit. And like slammed the doors and they were out. And I thought even after, and firstly, like who's going to see Dawkins? A scientist.
Yes.
He's a
scientist who's been quite open on this topic.
Yeah.
Bless him. So brave.
Yeah.
Compared with all the other ones. Can I tell you why I wouldn't call Jan Morris a woman? Mm-hmm. So Jan Morris, before identifying as Jan, was James Morris, actually a very well-known and very successful journalist and travel writer who was invited to accompany the first expedition to reach the peak of Everest and then report it back. I think he was writing for the Times at the time. No woman would have been invited to do that.
Oh. So when was this?
Oh God, we're talking 1970s, was it?
Oh.
So Jan Morris died a couple of years ago and was quite old when it happened. So if you say that Jan Morris was the journalist and she went and did this thing, you're suggesting that women were treated back then in a way that women weren't treated, like women were locked out of jobs. The fact is that was a man who was given that opportunity and no woman would have been given that opportunity. So I think you conceal that fact if you pretend that person is a woman.
Yeah, they were like the only woman in the world then that was able to get that kind of access.
And it's because he was a man. He wasn't even identifying as Jan at the time.
I'd like to watch back that Danish Girl film because I watched that before the whole trans thing kicked off and I probably watched it quite sympathetically. And I wonder... It's
also very invented. I mean, I've actually read the autobiography of the Danish Girl and it is a work of fiction.
I see. Okay.
It's actually a very sad story. I mean, the guy who called himself Lily Elba died about a year and a half after the operation because it was basically a charlatan. The setup was absolute charlatanry. The idea was that you could transplant ovaries into men and they would suddenly become women. But it was before they understood anything about organ transplants or blood types or they didn't have antibiotics. So this poor man died in absolute agony.
What, they had like ovaries in him?
Yeah, they put ovaries into him. And either they lied a lot to him or he was a total fantasist because he said things like, so he was a physiologically normal man, okay? So they removed his male genitals from outside. And then when they put in these ovaries from a young, healthy woman, there's a thing that's worth pointing out there, they told him that they had found shriveled, weakened ovaries inside him as well. But I mean, that's not possible because the same tissue becomes the ovaries and the testicles. So if he had normal testicles, he can't have had ovaries inside him.
Okay.
So either he made that up entirely or they lied to him. And then, little side note on those ovaries, at the time there was a theory, I mean there's always theories that women's reproductive systems are what cause mental illness. But at the time there was a theory they called vicarious menstruation, which was that women might bleed from other parts of their body as a way of menstruating, in particular like nosebleeds and the like. It's obvious bullshit, right?
Yes.
But then they would take the ovaries out to treat it, obviously thereby sterilising the woman.
If they had like a nosebleed, they would take the ovaries out.
If she was a bit hysterical and if she ended up in the hands of one of these mental doctor is like, this is, I'm talking back in 20s, 30s here. So he says in the book, he asked who the ovaries were from. And they just said, you don't worry about that, young, healthy woman. So some young woman was sterilized for mental health reasons, I can guarantee you. And those ovaries were put in him, and they will immediately not have taken, because there was no knowledge of how to do organ transplants, all the drug regimen that you get now and all of that. And then they did another operation on him where he seems to have been under the impression that he was getting uterus. But we still don't do uterus transplants now. So I think they gave him some bit of tissue from somebody.
This is horrific.
And he died in agony, absolute agony. The next year and a bit of his life was just the worst. And he died, obviously, of sepsis and the like.
Was that in the film?
No.
Bloody hell.
No.
My wife says I have vicarious menstruation because I get a bit down when it's her period and I start to make it about me.
Yeah, that's just narcissism.
Well, my theory is that over the years, I've come to see that before her time, she's a bit down, and that because I'm so empathetic, that makes me down.
No.
I think that's what it is.
I don't
think it
so.
really should be more about me.